Over the weekend, Vice President Kamala Harris delivered remarks and criticized the new curriculum approved by the Florida Department of Education. Let's hear some of what she said.
In the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
The new curriculum says instruction includes how slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit.
CNN political commentator Scott Jennings roasted Vice President Harris on her apparent, according to him, misrepresentation of this situation. Let's watch.
This is a completely made-up deal. I looked at the standards. I even looked at an analysis of the standards in every instance where the word slavery or slave was used. I even read the statement of the African-American scholars that wrote the standards, not Ron DeSantis, but the scholars. Everybody involved in this says this is completely a fabricated issue. And yet, look how quickly Kamala Harris jumped on it. So the fact that this is her best moment, a fabricated matter, is pretty ridiculous in my opinion.
On the flip side, CNN commentator Karen Finney praised Harris's comments.
It was a stellar moment, and I think she did something that she has done often in the last couple of years, which is in a moment when something needed to be said, she got out there and said it and really channeled what people were feeling. I mean, the idea that we would literally have a conversation, I mean, I have to laugh, it's so disgusting, that there were personal benefits of any kind to slaves. That's like saying women, you know, were happy when we couldn't vote and we couldn't have our own banking accounts. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
So one of the analyses of the standards was done by Charles Cook in National Review. He's listed the 191 times slaves, slavery, etc. appears in the standards. I'm reading through them. I don't think they would be controversial to basically anyone. It very much seems to me from reading them that how horrible and inhumane slavery is being recommended to be taught in these very specifically in so many contexts. So I do think from looking at this that Kamala Harris is greatly exaggerating her narrative for how bad these standards are. But what was your takeaway?
Yeah, so I read through the actual curriculum. I still have it up on my computer. And I mean, they do recommend teaching the actions of Nat Turner, John Brown, Frederick Douglass, and responses to their efforts to end slavery. It's a pretty thorough curriculum, which leads me to wonder, how would a teacher teach all of this in 1 year or one semester? Are they picking parts of this which they focus on more than others? In which case, it would be concerning that there's such a large amount of information to be taught on slavery pre-1619. Slavery in Africa, slavery in Asia, a lot of claims about the existence of slavery before European colonizers arrived there in
Well, that's
Africa.
in here. A lot of that is in here.
A lot of that is in
Instruction
here.
includes how slavery was utilized in Asian, European, and African cultures, identify Afro-Eurasian trade routes, describe the contact of European explorers with slave trading in Africa, the connections between Russian serfdom and slavery, and so on.
Right. And it might be a little bit too much of a focus on that, right? I think there's a complicated history there that I don't know that a high school teacher can tease through. It's the kind of curriculum that I didn't get till I was, a concentrated major in African studies and the international studies major that I had in undergrad. And it's something that has taken a lot of effort to get to be recognized, the contact of Europeans to Africa. What was Africa like before that? This idea that people were kidnapping their brothers and sisters and cousins and selling them as slaves is just not something that is backed up by anthropologists and historians. And it seems to me that there's a lot of focus on that in this curriculum, which is concerning. It's not that it's everything, but it's certainly there. And this contrast in the media coverage of this, the claim that it's fabricated, I think is not true. Those exact words are in the curriculum. And teachers can expand upon that. And so for folks to be talking about that in mainstream media is concerning. The one thing I will say about Kamala Harris's appearance is that she uniquely had approved talking points seemingly before appearing in public this time.
Yeah, she had something to say that I think was wrong. It made grammatical sense. Is
unique.
An improvement for her. And I guess so. The specific thing they're up in arms about is the teaching that
personal benefits.
Slaves, there were personal benefits that some experienced during slavery that allowed them to be successful in their lives, and then after slavery. I think there's certainly like a way of saying that sound, and maybe that was a clumsy phrasing for it, but I don't think, obviously, the suggestion should not be that slavery, despite being bad, was still somehow beneficial. Slavery was definitely not beneficial. I think what they were just trying to do is recognize that some enslaved people, learned to read or learn skills that actually weren't supposed to learn, but people taught them. They learned from each other. Some people went against what the slavery regime prescribed that you were supposed to do, and that it's just a historical fact. Not that it was ideal, or that we're saying it's good, or that it lessens the evil of slavery, but just the reality is that enslaved people had lives and culture and some even within the regime of slavery, economic growth and conditions and learning that did allow them to flourish even under slavery and after slavery. But that is not an excuse for slavery or something,
right.
a box to check. That's despite slavery. Right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's how a good teacher would take this curriculum.
Despite slavery, these people thrived and achieved something and bettered themselves in their stations, and were prepared to survive, to do even better without it, despite slavery, not because of it. Maybe that's the framing.
Right. And slaves developing skills that could be used for their personal benefit is the kind of sentence that's what was their personal benefit? We will teach you how to till the soil and pick the cotton, and the personal benefit to you is you won't get beaten by your master if you do these things. Seriously, that's what I get from that. But also to frame it as this kind of large skills training. We're teaching people a trade, and slavery is just this big, charitable project to teach people skills. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. But never. I don't know. But I think Kamala Harris was reading that into it because she wants to be big mad about this.
Yeah, I think she wanted to have a moment, and
or
using
whoever wrote her
Gen Z language of gaslighting. She really wanted it to go viral, and it's this common cringe thing that politicians do now, where they say things in a way where you just know they're trying to go viral. There's no righteous indignation in the word they're trying to gaslight us. I'm sorry, but using pop culture words in this scenario it doesn't land.
Gaslighting has just become the most overused term for everything, right? Everyone's gaslighting everybody all the time.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think the problem with the curriculum is simply that it can be interpreted, because it's vague, and interpreted in a direction where they can minimize what slavery was and the impact of slavery.
Right.
And I think that's the main problem with it.
But I don't think they're trying to do that.
Right. They could.
I mean, there's there's 160 or however many mentions of slavery, and very much. Again, I haven't read every single one of them yet, but it gives you the impression that slavery is bad. I don't think schools are actually out there teaching that slavery is not bad. Am I wrong about that?
I don't know. I think we're going to find out. I think there's going to be much more attention on this, and I think now there's going to be kids that have their cell phones in classrooms, and if a teacher's taking this curriculum in the other direction, they're going to have heard their parents talking about it on the dinner table or heard about it in the news and think.
I mean, I'm sure there in some southern school districts in the past there's been, I'm not sure so much different spin on slavery was bad, but maybe a different spin on that the Civil War was actually fought over states' rights rather than slavery. Sure, there's a whitewashing of or whatever you want to call it of how bad the Confederacy was and how structured over slavery it was and lost cause. Okay, I get all that. I know some of that went on. Evolution is true. I know. So schools aren't always teaching what good progressives want them to teach and that sort of thing. Fine, but I'm looking at what they're doing in Florida, and it seems this stuff seems pretty normal at the K through 12 level. It seems pretty within keeping of what history is. So
growing up in a northern state, in Connecticut, and then now living in the South, I feel that the way the northern states teach slavery sows division in the country, because they teach it from the perspective of we were so benevolent and good, and like we wanted to stop it, but they wanted to keep the slaves. That doesn't make sense, because who imported the slaves? Where were the largest slave auctions? New York City, right?
You're not letting Massachusetts Bay Colony off the hook here.
Right, exactly. They were also complicit. In fact, they sold it to them. Think about what happens if you're selling drugs. You are the drug dealer, and you get in trouble and you get booked, and someone who bought the weed or drugs also gets booked.
Right.
Who gets in more trouble? The one that was selling the stuff. And so the way that the North frames themselves is totally innocent. They were also benefiting from getting extremely cheap raw goods from the South. Their economy and their economic well-being and them getting rich depended on slavery. They were entirely complicit. So that also needs to be taught, I think, in Northern schools. There's a lot of changing of the curriculum to be done, but there's some good stuff in this curriculum, and there's some stuff that I think is vague and could be taught in bad ways.
All right, we'll have more Rising right after this.